Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ales Ernitzel. I'm a host of this podcast. My guest tonight is Jean-François Gariepy. I always wanted to show how I learned French in my high school, but that's about all I know about French language, the pronunciation. Hi, Jean Francois, and thank you for accepting my invitation, and thanks for coming to my podcast. So, Jean Francois is, for those who don't know who he is, he's a veteran of free speech wars on Twitter. He's been on a so-called dissident right for 10 years. He's been with this movement of dissident right practically from the beginning. He's been one of the forefathers of the so-called dissident right, and I'm really glad he came to my podcast today. So Jean Francois, did I tell a lie about you or
No, it's all good. Let's get started.
yeah? So I wanted to start with this video. Nicolas Fuentes tweeted it's Benjamin Netanyahu coming to visit Donald Trump. So, in your opinion, how is it possible for a billionaire who was supposed to be more independent than common folk like me, for example, or like many Americans who've been critical of Israel, of Netanyahu, and broadly speaking, Jews? How is it possible for him to be, not only him, Elon Musk also, to be such an Israeli or even only Bibi Netanyahu's beach, actually?
Yeah, it's a question that I ask myself all the time. How is it that I'm freer than it would seem Donald Trump and Elon Musk? And by the way, I'm hearing some echo in your speaker, so you might want to turn it down or mute yourself when I speak. So yeah, they should be free, but they're not. And the fact is, the more you have in this society, the more you can be held by the balls. And Jewish interests have a way to get to these guys that is so vicious. When you look at Trump, his entire family is breeding with Jews. So he is associated, and his fate is kind of tied to Israeli interest more than ever. And it used to be that he was kind of free of it or displaying at least some freedom, but at this point he's giving sign that he has totally kneeled. So it's a combination of factors. From the more you have official possessions, if you don't have Bitcoin, if you don't have something that they can't get to, they will get to it. And Trump has towers, he has hotels, and all of these things are extremely easy for governments to repossess with corrupt judges, corrupt government agents, and New York has shown that they were able to deploy that kind of strategy. So you have a combination of an attack that's happening over Trump. It's a professional attack where he's being surrounded by Jewish interests. It's a financial attack because he's being held by the balls, because all of his possessions could be worth zero tomorrow morning if the government decides to. And it's a family and personal attack when all of his children end up marrying Jews. You're muted.
Do you think he's always been aware of the fact that he's not worth anything without the the Jews?
I think he's been, and I think that's why he probably ran a campaign in 2016 knowing that he couldn't honor his America First promise. So he probably knew that he couldn't go hard at the system, that they would get back to him. And what's the saddest thing is normally when the system goes at you, you're supposed to have nothing to lose. You're supposed to come back with a vengeance. But Trump is totally different. Trump takes intimidation in, and it seems that the prosecution and the legal persecution he's been the victim of has been actually helping to make him side with Israeli powers.
But has he really or actually ever been truly different? Okay, he's been different in um, you know the situation in America much better than I do. But what do you think are the points he's been different? So, for example, in 2016 to 2020.
So in 2016, Trump ran on various themes, all of which were themes of revolution against established powers. So you had Drain the Swamp. Drain the Swamp was the idea we're going to get rid of the DC elite. They're not going to control the country anymore. This never happened, so it was an unfulfilled promise. Drain the Swamp was one. He also said, we are done with never-ending wars in the Middle East. So that was also a promise which he fulfilled partially. So Trump didn't get into a war, and in that sense, he was more peaceful, effectively, than all presidents before him, each of which had brought us into some kind of ground war of some sort, and a never-ending one, most of them lasting up to 20, 30 years. So he was better than other presidents, but at the same time, his policy had changed toward the airstrikes. So he was doing a lot of airstrikes on behalf of Israel, siding with Israel against Syria. And so we can say that it was partially fulfilled, but I personally feel that he had made more promises than he fulfilled. That is, when he said we're done with never-ending wars in the Middle East, I thought we were completely out of the Middle East. It turned out we were still in with airstrikes. Now, on this election right now that's happening, the big difference is Trump is under no promise at all that he will not get us into a war. And in fact, a message from him on Telegram, and that's probably from his Truth Social, in response to the Bibi Netanyahu appearance in front of the Congress, he says, if they do assassinate me, which is always a possibility, I hope that America obliterates Iran. And he goes on to make very severe judgment of Iran, claiming stuff that I will not repeat here. But he's basically calling for full war against Iran. So we have here a war president that's rising, and yet his base of support is still under the impression that he's the guy who said we will not have never-ending wars back in 2016.
Are there any promises at all from 2016 that he's still kind of purporting to persuade his loyal bases that he's the same guy from the 2016?
I think that on immigration, I expect that he can deliver relatively good, although he's way too open on legal immigration, and that's always been his Achilles heel. But if you compare the Trump of today with the Trump of 2016, you have kind of the same level of commitment to immigration enforcement. However, he is promoting and more warm to the idea of legal migration, saying he wants to tack a green card to every diploma given in universities. That is ridiculous, because precisely the enemy of the right in America is educated people who are brainwashed by college. So to give them a green card is like to guarantee the failure of the Republican Party long term.
Yeah, it's funny how his own media tried to persuade us how Marxists took over their education system, and now he's trying to say that it's nothing wrong with their educational system.
Yes.
How what were your sentiments when the so-called I have to go with the so-called attempt of assassination on Trump went on? Were you, because I saw some of the dissident right wingers, not the conservatives, not the mainstream conservatives, but dissident right people like Nicolas Fuentes and so forth, who were somewhat euphoric about the fact that he wasn't killed. And it was like this reaction on the dissident right, as if this was some kind of a sign of God, that now he's coming for the win and he's going to be the right person who's going to lead the American people as his first interests. What were your sentiments when all this happened?
Yeah, personally, I don't see intervention of God here, and I don't see it ever because I'm an atheist. But my first reaction to the shooting was emotion. I was really under shock and almost anxiety because I failed at sleeping for 2 days following the attempted assassination. I've not succeeded at sleeping normally, so I was really under shock. I felt that it was an attack on all of us and all of the right wing in America. Now, eventually, the rationality came back and I took my senses back. And now we can see it, we can analyze it more coldly. It remains the same. It's an attack, but it's an attack by who? I still don't know. Who would have wanted Trump to die? It was this Thomas Crook coached in some way by some forces or funded or helped? We still don't know any of this. So to me, it's still a mystery. Was he just one of these leftists who hate Trump and who think he's a fascist, as it is reported in the mainstream media? Was he just brainwashed and a loner? Or was he coached? I still want answers on this that I don't have. That being said, with the survival of Trump from this, I would attribute it to luck and to the fact that it was a very long shot. I mean, it would have kind of been surprising if he had succeeded at aiming for the head of Trump on a single first shot.
Knowing how sick people that run the country behind the scenes are, could it be possible that it was staged?
People have raised this possibility. I've listened to the theory, but I've not been convinced by any argument. I don't see why you would stage this, how, and I just, it's very hard to get such a prepared conspiracy and leave no trace. You would have had to be, Trump would have been coached. He would have been coached to have some fake blood device explode. I just find it too much of a reach.
I mean, I have to admit, I do think it was, it looked from the point of view of a foreigner, not emotionally involved. When I looked at this, it seemed to me as if I watched some kind of B Hollywood movie.
Well, welcome to America. That is very often reality is stranger than fiction. And it's not the first time that people have this feeling that some event is so ridiculous that it couldn't even be fiction, that it's poorly written fiction if it is.
Yeah, it was really funny, really funny. What do you think about Kamala Harris, the new Democratic candidate for the presidency? So of course we're speaking in the terms of we or in the terms of believing that the elections will not be rigged and so forth. So, what's your opinion on Kamala? She's like the whole left wing, or the majority of the left wing. They are at least somewhat anti-Israel, to the point anti-Israel. So this is a little bit odd, isn't it?
It's interesting to see the dynamic where they have a voter base that they would lose. The say Muslim voter base, or Middle Eastern sympathetic, or even other minorities like blacks who are sympathetic to Gaza for some reason. They have all this base that they could lose a big chunk of if they were too openly supportive of Israel. Now, in effect, the Biden presidency has been supportive of Israel. It is under Biden's watch that Netanyahu felt free enough to basically wipe out Gaza from the surface of the earth and compress everyone down to Rafah. So let's not forget that the Democrat elite is very pro-Israel. Kamala also is very pro-Israel. But she has a different signaling than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has decided that he was running to be the biggest cheerleader ever of Israel, whereas Kamala Harris is critical of the humanitarian concerns and the actions of Netanyahu, because there's a whole wing of the left wing in America that believes Israel is not evil, but it's Netanyahu that's evil, and it's the right-wing government of Israel that's evil. Now, that's levels of self-deception I'm not capable of, but they have to hold this view because at the same time they want to sympathize with the Jewish people. They need to find what's the enemy then. What is this? What is happening in Israel that leads them to feel entitled to take on so many civilian casualties? So they have this explanation that, oh, it's the evil right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Kamala Harris is a tough sell. She is an annoying voice. She has annoying behaviors. So it's really not the candidate that I see to run if you want to win. But unfortunately, I'm afraid that the Democrats elites don't want to win. I think that they decided if we're stuck with a Democrat Party that is not fully behind Israel the way Trump is, then we're going to drop them under the bus. And you saw a big pivot of certain key actors from big tech, Elon Musk, even Zuckerberg to a certain extent, each warming themselves to the idea of voting for Trump, which Trump was the enemy to eliminate in 2016, and now he has become the adored figure that will restore America and restore the relationship with Israel, a full backing of Israel. So Kamala, on the other hand, is an extremely radical mainstream politician. Surprisingly, she is a VP right now who is for the abolition of assault rifles in America. This is crazy. This is basically everyone's gun, the AR-15, being confiscated if Kamala gets her way. So it's dramatic, because who should I vote for? Who should I root for? I have no clue in this election, because on the one hand, I have a Trump that is fully kneeled in front of powers that appear to totally own him. And on the other hand, I have a person who no doubt will use every opportunity to impede on American rights.
What do you think is the reason they promote, the Democrats have been promoting such candidates for years now, such candidates that are really tough to sell? So Harris is tough to sell, Biden is tough to sell. There are people inside the Democrat Party, or at least people that are sympathetic towards the Democrat Party, that could run for president. For example, Kennedy is some sort of a lefty, isn't he? Bernie Sanders, although he's some lunatic of his own, he is more of a people's person than Biden and Harris. Why don't they run people that it would be easier to sell? Do you think that basically the normies win the elections for the Democrats, the undecided normies?
I think the low quality of the candidates is linked to the fact that the equation that leads to a victory within the Democrat Party is becoming too complex. There are too many schisms. So think of it. You have a 30% of the Democratic base voter is very much pro-Gaza, very much aware of Israel's action. So you have this 30% that you can't totally lose. You need to speak to them in some normie terms that they will understand that you side with them. So you have the Young Turk type who are very aware of oppression of Muslim issues in Israel, and they are annoyed if you side too much with Israel. On the other hand, you have far leftists who basically don't want private property anymore. You have these far leftists who are for BLM, for putting minorities forward so much as to deny rights to white people. You have black people who are an acquired voter base for the Democrat, but they have their own interest. Now, when you start listing everything that you need to have to be a valid candidate for even just those extremist and more fringe bases, you need to be quite the creature. You need you need to be a cock basically, and you need to be so cocked that they converge toward Biden, who be having difficulty to even express ideas, to even lay down sentences. That's what they converge to. They basically preferred someone who can't speak than someone who can speak and then offend them because they're too triggered.
Crazy, crazy world. I saw a debate on your profile, on your X profile, about libertarianism and nationalism, and I saw that you are of opinion, if I may say so, that you can merge the nationalism and libertarianism in sort of way. Could you explain me a little bit how?
Yeah, so there's typically an error by libertarians who are too extreme libertarians, and they think that any form of nation is a violation of rights, and they see it that way because they say, well, you have a border. If you have a border, you are blocking someone else from outside from freely circulating. And the per libertarians, who are per to the point of their own disservice, in my view, they will tell you that this is a violation of the non-aggression principle. In other words, by defining a border that I say Africans cannot pass this, or people who come from Europe cannot pass this, I have blocked their free movement and I have violated liberty. Now, in my view of libertarianism, that is not the case. I don't see it that way, and I see libertarianism as totally compatible with nationalism. Because I believe that when you instantiate a society of liberty, there are people who are not in a position to reciprocate. They are not in a position to honor your liberty in the same way you honor theirs. And therefore, liberty to me must be a protective bubble, a contract between people who can sign a contract. And I believe that most people on planet Earth cannot sign a contract because think of say, someone who lives in Australia. If he messes with America, if he destroys America in some way, there's nothing in it for him to care about. As long as he lives in Australia, anything that happens into America has no consequences for him. Because there's no consequences for the external people of a society, I believe that people that are external to the libertarian bubble must not have their liberty honored because they have not promised in return to honor our liberties. And in fact, they are incapable of this promise very often because if you don't select them extremely harshly, you end up with a demographic that will cause increased crime in your society in a way that violates the promise of liberty. So, in my view, liberty is a promise that is made between people that are honorable and capable of honoring their promise, the way America was founded. But it's not a guarantee to every human being or every animal, even because there are libertarian vegans. It's not a promise to every living thing that we will honor their liberty.
Yeah, I mean, it is some sort of a white idealism which is closer to reality than it would be a libertarianism based on black idealism or something like that. You can base libertarianism on white idealism much safer than you can on black idealism, of
Yes.
course. And we're talking maybe even subconsciously um, um, presupposing that we're whites building white nations. But what I was thinking is, if you say, okay, we should extend the personal liberty and liberty as far as it goes, as so that it doesn't harm the basic collective goals, for example, existence of our ethnicity, our race, and so forth and so forth. But uh, this also implies that not every individual can trade, sell, buy, and so forth everything that he wants to, even if it's effective, even if it brings money, even if it brings taxes back. So what I was thinking is, why not call it nationalism? Because to me, nationalism implies the love for your own people, and the love for your own people implies that you don't want them to be um, I don't know, depressed, and part of not being depressed is also being able to express yourself in so many ways, which basically means having liberties. So why not call it nationalism and tell it like it is? So nationalism, of course, wants to extend liberty of his own people because it's good for them, if it's good for them, but it's not
Well,
necessary, isn't it?
to me, the push for liberty must be stronger than just what's necessary for the well-being of a people. To me, the push for liberty must be radical, and yes, it must not step over the existence of the people that sustains that liberty, but it goes way beyond. It's a contract where I cannot impede on your future rights. Like, think of America. It has been founded at a time where the internet didn't exist at all, and yet there were promises made. The First Amendment. The state will not impede on your freedom of speech. Now it takes a whole new sense under the internet, the internet technology, to have the First Amendment. But that's the idea of a promise. The promise was made, and we hold it into society as a dear important thing to carry forward. Now, I don't fully disagree with your analysis. Okay, we could call it nationalism, but let's be clear, there are forms of nationalism that are tied to state authority and where state authority will be abused. And in fact, you could argue that we are in a form of leftist nationalism, as the state has been ever growing in the last 100 years in America, both in Canada and in the US. So, arguably, we are in a nationalism that is not libertarian.
um, okay, but I will also argue that there is no true left nationalism. The left nationalism is always civic nationalism.
Yes.
It's never ethnic. It's never based on race. But I do agree that even if you make this distinction, there is no necessity that would show that while you have ethnic and racial nationalism, that you'd be you'd be somehow better when you take over the state and behave as a dictator. I
But I
agree.
would point out that all nationalism ends up being ethnic in the end. In a way, you can argue that, let's say, white nationalism is a nationalism that is oriented toward people of European descent. But you could argue that Joe Biden nationalism, or what you would call civic nationalism in the US, as it expresses itself right now, you could argue that it's a form of the building of a new race, of a multiracial mix, including Indian immigrants, Southern American immigrant, and the base populations of whites and blacks in America. So in the end, every civic nationalism ends up being an ethnic nationalism, just with a greater circle.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you because I come from the former Yugoslavia, which was supposed to be a communist country, international internationalist or international socialist country, and at the end, it ended in some sort of Yugoslavian nationalism, and even more. Not only that the new nationalism was formed, even the all the different republics based on different ethnicities, they basically lived for themselves. There was no actual Yugoslavian public life at all.
Mm.
While Yugoslavia had Serbo-Croatian language, that was a formal language, and Slovenes don't speak Serbo-Croatian language, Macedonians don't speak it, and so forth. Um, so there was some sort of public place, but at the end of the day, all the small nations in Yugoslavia lived by themselves, and the only thing they had in common was some sort of Yugoslavian nationalism, which was uh, which was focused on hating Kosovo Albanians, basically.
Okay.
And this is till this day. This is what till this day makes possible for ex-Yugoslav ethnicities to come together, is their hatred toward Kosovo Albanians. Um,
Yes, I've heard of it very superficially. I don't know the area. I once considered moving to these areas, but I realized no, there's too much shit there. I'm going to be in trouble.
hmm. Yeah, maybe you'd be in trouble. Yeah. It's better to stay. I'm not actually aware you're
I'm
living in,
in Canada. I live in Canada.
but Canada is also a really leftist dictatorial.
Yes. You have to choose your spot. You have to live far from civilization, and they leave you alone.
Oh, okay. Did they took any of your assets during the COVID?
Oh no. I don't. The trick to survive in a socialist country is to own nothing and have no assets to be taken from you.
Huh. Uh, tell me something. What's your opinion on the meltdown of a Canadian super intellectual, Jordan B. Peterson, a couple of weeks ago?
Oh yeah, it's interesting. We've seen a trajectory of Jordan that goes from what was purported as a fighter for free speech, especially against compelled speech. That was the trademark of Jordan, when he started going after the laws in Canada that would include trans into a hate category for the purpose of criminal enforcement. And Jordan Peterson then was seen as the edgy thinker who would even do references about frog memes and Pepe and interact with these kinds of memes and fight for the freedom to say, the freedom to gender the way one intends, and etc. Now, he has converged across the years, being called out on a series of questions, especially as it relates to Israel and as it relates to Israeli interest across the world in history. People will remember the famous sentence, "I can't do it." He cannot read a book of Solzhenitsyn, who he otherwise adores as a hero. So it's weird. It's weird. He loves this author, but there's one book of this author that he refuses to read because he can't do it. He really can't put his eyes on it. So Jordan has a problem. He has this bias when it comes to Israel. He's incapable of even thinking clearly, and that led him to commit a couple of mistakes in being too aggressive against a rising force on the internet. Now that we have Elon Musk has freed speech for people so that they can be in opposition to Israel, because we used to be banned for 2 or 3 years. People like me were banned, and there was a lot of a cold effect on speech, a cooling effect where people were intimidated. They knew that you cannot raise the question of Israel or you're going to get banned. Now that Elon has come on X, it has freed a lot of speech. And now people like Jordan Peterson realize they have been living in a protected bubble. They have been living in a safe space. And really, we knew from 2016, because I was involved in the whole internet movement for opening speech on this issue. We knew that they didn't have arguments. We knew that whenever leftists or extremely pro-Israeli people or Jews were coming into debates, they were systematically getting destroyed. And so we knew that censorship came in to save this side of politics, because this side of politics on the free market of ideas was getting absolutely annihilated. But now, with Elon Musk changing the game on the internet and bringing back this speech, we are coming to shake back debates that have been dormant for basically 3-4 years under censorship. And that leads Jordan to be literally losing his cool on Twitter and calling people devil, troll demons, and anonymous haters of all kind. And he doesn't have an argument. Basically, the question is, and it's becoming pretty clear from international court judgments and commentators and experts on the question, Israel, what it's doing right now in Gaza is a genocide. And it meets the criteria of the genocide, and we should act in accordance to it. We should seek for this genocide to stop. But of course, these people are all on the payroll of Israel. And you can have this picture of Jordan Peterson shaking hands in what seems to be a restaurant or a cigar lounge with Bibi Netanyahu. Jordan Peterson is very friendly with the Jewish establishment, and he's currently being paid by the Daily Wire. So they don't have a choice to side with Israel. In fact, these people are not free thinkers. We've seen it with Candace Owens. Candace Owens has been super honorable in her pursuit of the truth and saw something wrong in the actions of the state of Israel and criticized it. And she ended up being fired from the Daily Wire and going on her own for her own career. So these people are fake intellectuals. They can only live in a censored domain, because if there's no censorship, then they see thousands of replies to their inaccurate tweets on Twitter, and they get frustrated and they start insulting people as troll demons. So what we're seeing is the unfolding of what happens in a world where there's no censorship. Well, in that world, these fake intellectuals are getting called out and getting basically expelled from the public space by basically intellectual failure, intellectual victory for their critiques.
we used to think for many years that there's this there are these left-wing Jews that are the most powerful in the sense of owning the space of free speech, in the sense of them regulating who and what can speak. But nowadays it seems as if the right wings sort of say Zionist Jews are the most powerful. For example, Ben Shapiro, Jordan B. Peterson, and these people, they were on the forefront of this the so-called free speech movement, as in they were their rights to speak freely were taken away from the powerful left-wing establishment. But nowadays it seems that the tide has turned in the other way, or it's been fake the whole time. What's your opinion on this?
I fully agree with your analysis. There's a pivot happening. This pivot is basically Jewish powers realizing we don't have what we would expect from the left. It's not to our service enough, so we're going to switch toward the right. Now, in this switch, if the right is going to become the voice of Jewish establishment, they cannot picture themselves as oppressed and censored anymore, because they're going to become mainstream, basically. They want to start making the idea of Trump is not this evil person. He's just a normal guy, and you should vote for him. So that's what we see. You're totally right. At the beginning, there was leftist infiltration of things like YouTube, which led to the first era of censorship between 2017 and 2020, which kind of fizzled down after the COVID era. And now we have a totally different movements where basically there's an abandonment of the left. The left of the future will be much more populist and much less pro-Israel establishment, because Israel has realized that they have an inability to convince the new generation of young Zoomers that they can side with Israel in the future.
I had a little dispute with Ricardo Duchesne. I like, and I like his stuff, and I respect him. But um, f- from my perspective, when I see Putin and his Russia, it seems as if he was put there to act the role of a global right wing, because when I listen to his speeches, when I read what he says, he's basically Trump as a president in Russia. He panders to Jews all the time. He's been civic nationalist throughout his whole life. He never mentions Russians, ethnic Russians, as being his first focus in his politics. He never mentions Slavs, Slavic people, as being in charge of Russia, which has historically been Slavic and European and white. Okay, and you can joke about of whether Slavs are white and so forth, but you know what I mean. But you can never hear from Putin anything that would make Slavs, white people in Russia, happy. Very similarly to what Trump has meant to the dissident rights to white nationalists in America. What's your opinion about it?
That's a very fine analysis. I agree with it. Basically, Putin is a weird instantiation of Western globalism, if you will. He tries to be like Western globalism, he absorbs some of the values of it, and ultimately it comes to his service in a different way, but I think he sees himself as potentially extending an empire over the entire Arab world, and eventually Russia being so aligned with the Arab world, they expect that basically the Arab world and the Muslims will be siding with Russia in a worldwide conflict. That's the way I see it. And so being inclusive to multiple religions and multiple races is a talking point we do hear from Putin. And yes, it's sad because I don't think there's places in a multiracial empire. There's not place for such an empire to be stable across times, because in such an empire it boils down to this: who is serving as soldiers to go to sacrifice for the goods of the extension of the empire. And inevitably it's going to be the model that Putin has tried to start with Ukraine, but which will probably take more importance as we go. This model where you take the Chechens and you send them as soldiers into Ukraine to do the dirty business. It's a very sad future for anyone who's stuck in a multiracial empire, and to be in fact the serving race for the military effort.
Yeah. What I also wanted to point out when I spoke with Ricardo Rushanis, he told me to grow up, because I told him that it's not the Slavs who run the country; it's the Jews who run the country. And he said to me that I have to grow up, that it's not the Jews, that Putin has been in charge. And I told him, yes, in charge how? It does not show how in charge he is. I mean, how can we, from the point of view of someone who's not in his nearby colleague or something like that, how can we judge what's he's all about? We can judge on the basis of what he says, and everything he says has been an obviously Jewish narrative. He talks a lot about Holocaust. He talks a lot about denazification of Ukraine. He talks
Yes.
about Nazis as being an absolute evil. He's not been talking about Slavs, white people, Russia is white Slavic country at all. He's been,
Yes.
and based on that, I can only judge that somebody has been giving him orders on what to say, and it seems that it's been Jews.
You can take the boomerism out of the boomer, and perhaps even being a Russian president, if you're a boomer, there's really nothing to help you.
Do you think these types like Trump or even Jordan Peterson, do you think that they're boomers too? That this affects their thinking also a lot?
Yeah, I think that Trump, being a voice of internet revolt, basically in 2016, was basically an accident of history, and that he's not made for it. We elevated him, and people like Richard Spencer, participated to his elevation in 2016. But I think ultimately it's an anomaly, and it shouldn't have happened. And it wasn't the guy that we were hoping he was.
No, no, he really wasn't. But how did this change in 2016 happen? Because everybody preceded Trump as a lifelong Democrat, this cosmopolitan entrepreneur or whatever that lived his whole life in New York and worked with Jews and all the races and so forth. And suddenly in 2016 he became a symbol of white pride and white nationalism. Was it,
Yes. Well, it's very hard to explain, but there's a couple of combinations that participate to this cocktail. First, he is a man, and he is a ballsy man, and he is an icon of masculinity. In a world that is canceling man and that is complaining against the patriarchy, there he was standing and being unbothered and not caring about what people think. So it was a very fresh approach to public relationships where, okay, there's 14 women who claim that he sexually assaulted them. No one cares. We still vote for him. So there was a big signal sent here to the Me Too, to the far radical feminists. We're going to elect the people you hate most. And the more you hate them, the more we'll vote for them. There was a little bit of this, and there was also the slide of a bunch of leftists who have never felt comfortable with far leftism. And the teams that have started to be pushed by the far leftists are starting to annoy people who would have found a home before in leftism. Like if you remove the whole gender militancy, the LGBT advocacy, that kind of thing, you could recuperate a lot of people back in the Democrat Party. But this whole idea of there were a lot of people like Trump who are with the Democrats because they like a big state, but they're willing to switch to the Republican side because they're annoyed at the extremes of child education and attacks on the family by the left, that it was representative of a type of American voter also.
do you think it's possible that the whole woke movement, the whole woke ideology that's been forced upon the public in America for many years now, that at least at the beginning it was somehow staged? Because I'll explain why I think this way. Because a couple of years ago I started seeing
Hmm.
this pink haired weird people, uh, as in by the scenario from the states, in Serbia. Serbia has been a symbol of mm, conservatism in ex-Yugoslavia and in this area, and you could see how they put these people as an actors, as to explain to people what these pronouns zer or whatever are. And so, what's your opinion on this? Could it be that because I don't see in my near environment, I don't see people like like that. You don't see actual people behaving like that, except on, I don't know, YouTube, TV, or something.
They do exist. You're probably not in the right environment to see them, and that's good for you. But if you want to see them, travel to America in those big hipster town, and you're gonna see plenty of this. They have bars where they encounter. They have food trucks where they congregate, and they celebrate their gender uniqueness. So it does exist. I would be open to the hypothesis you're raising that it would be an artificial push, perhaps by a George Soros type of interest, an outside interest that wants to see dissent within America. Perhaps I think it's totally viable as an hypothesis.
Uh, One of my last questions, or even the last question, I saw your short dispute with Milo Yiannopoulos on the causes of homosexuality. And this whole woke movement is connected a little bit with homosexuality, and the so-called transgenderism, gender dysphoria, and all these topics. And do you think there are some natural causes to this shift and behavior of the people? Because even if this whole thing was not staged, we have to admit this, that it came practically overnight. because 20 years ago you didn't have these people even in America. We would have to admit this, wouldn't we?
Yes, and the thing is, the left is on a path of denial of any form of social contagion effect on LGBT behavior. They want you to believe that, oh no, it's just their preference. They converge out of their preference kind of magically toward this sexual behavior or that. On that, we have no data at all. We don't have a valid experiment that shows whether you are gay or made gay by culture or encouraged to be gay by culture. So I refuse to play the game of the left here. The game of the left is to say, well, whoever becomes gay, it's because they were due to be gay. And to it's like everything else in the world. The left believes you can change through education. It seems that there's only this one magical thing, which is sexual preference, somehow not subject to education at all. That is weird to begin with as a kind of axiomatic worldview. But as far as my conflict with Milo Yiannopoulos, it's that yesterday he kind of carried one aspect of this myth of the left. He said there are no gay genes. And it's dangerous to say this, and I corrected him. And I said, there has to be a gay gene. Maybe it's a gene for something else. Maybe it's a gene that makes you more credulous when you go to school, or that makes you attracted to yellow to the LGBT flag colors, and that gets you, attracted to whatever is in the lifestyle of homosexuality. But there has to be a series of genes that all push you in that direction rather than another. And it's important to know this. We don't know this thing, that there are no gay genes. That's something that is repeatedly used on the left, and now we see Milo using it. It's just not true. We don't know that it's the case, and in fact, any sort of thinking around the question will point you to the almost certainty that there must be genes that push you in one direction rather than another. There are genes that make you more stubborn, genes that make you less stubborn. Well, if you're not stubborn and you're in an environment where there's a big push for homosexuality, perhaps you are more likely to integrate those preferences. These hypotheses have not been examined at all by our leftist scientists because they will never want to know. They will never want to know the answer to this question. They want the item of sexual preference to be this kind of new god, this unquestionable reality that you cannot probe, you cannot play with.
But isn't it funny that for a while they were purporting this slogan, "You were born this way." So for a very long time they tried to persuade us that there's no culture, and as you also said, that there's no cultural causes to homosexuality, and in the same time they are talking about the preferences. So they basically prefer some. They just act freely on their taste or something. It's obviously not a taste and a preference. That much we do know, actually, don't we?
Well, whether that's a semantic debate, I call it preference, but preferences can be influenced by all sorts of things. They can be influenced by genes, they can be influenced by environments having impacts on genetic predispositions. We've not begun to unearth the details of it, and we never will. We never will, because all of our scientists are left wing, and they all don't want to lift that carpet.
Miles also been in a phase where he believes he will stop to be gay, isn't he? Did I don't know if he stop being gay.
Well, one of my audience member was explaining to him that even in his interaction with me, he sounded a little gay, and he was correcting some of his words. And Milo answered, "Baby steps. I'm learning every day." So he's trying hard. He's trying hard, but we're not there yet, I think.
He's still dreaming about cocks and black cocks. Uh, I mean, Jean-Francois, I promised I won't take a lot of your time. I also have to work tomorrow. I'm really blessed that you came to my podcast. You're still a great name in the sphere of dissident right, white nationalism, and so forth. So I also have to thank you for everything you've done good for this movement. And once again, thank you for coming. Thank you for taking your time. Thank you for your thoughts. And have a good evening. Have a good day. What's the what's the time in Canada?
It's 5 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, you have the whole evening for yourself now.
Yes.
So thank
I'll
you.
take a break from my show. Thank you for having me, and it was great. It was fun. Thanks for the questions. Bye bye.
Bye.